All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are at 4 o'clock and would like to start our presentation on time for folks. I'm sure many of you have lots of things to get to on this Monday afternoon. So I want to introduce myself. My name is Marissa Berg, and I am the Executive Director at Community Support Network. We are the association of the 10 area agencies in the state, and we wanted to share with you some really important information about House Bill 2 and the state budget, and do a walkthrough for folks who have maybe never engaged with the state budget before or are just particularly interested in this process. And actually, I see that we have Jim Monahan, who just joined. He is co-presenting today. Welcome, Jim. And Jim works with CSNI as our kind of monitoring government affairs and helping us with just all government-related things, including being our guru on the state budget. So thank you for joining today, Jim. So I am going to walk through, we anticipate being on maybe about an hour, maybe a little bit less, but certainly no more. So I will just go over the agenda. So we will start by walking through the steps of state budget development for the state of New Hampshire. We will walk through each of the different requests from each of the different steps of the budget. So we'll start with the DHHS agency request. So that would be specifically looking at the Bureau of Developmental Services. We'll then look at the governor's budget and what Governor Ayotte proposed for changes. We will look at House Bill 2, which is the iteration of the budget that currently has been voted on. We will look at what this means for individuals with disabilities and their families, and look at advocacy. What can you do about it if you disagree with what is going on? Just wanted to touch on a few housekeeping things. The numbers that we're going to show you are biennial numbers. So the state budget is a 2-year budget, meaning that while you will likely see in different outlets a yearly budget, so there's year 2026, fiscal year 2026, and fiscal year 2027 are the 2 years that we're looking at. The numbers that we're going to show you today, we combined them. So just for simplicity's sake, the split up numbers are available, certainly, but just because we didn't want to throw all kinds of numbers at everybody all at once, we've combined these to show you biennial numbers. So it's fiscal year 26 and 27 combined in much of the information you're going to see today. We also cannot address questions. So oftentimes we will be telling you what we know. We are certainly, we are not part of the House of Representatives. We are just sharing the information that we have seen, the information that we know, and really are just trying to use this to empower folks and to allow you to know what is going on in your state government. However, we will show you some resources at the end, so places that you can go to find more information. One of those you can certainly go to anytime is the CSNI website at www.csni.org. We are also on Facebook, so a lot of times that's a good way to get some updated information. I also want to share that this is being recorded, so if you have to leave early or if you have a friend or a family member who is not able to join today, this will be recorded and posted to the CSNI website for people to go back and reference if they need to. So I will hand it over to you, Jim. I don't know if you want to walk through what the state budget process is. I did steal this graphic from our friends over at New Futures, so if there's anybody from New Futures on, thank you. But this, I thought, was a really clear way of showing what the steps are to the state budget. So are you okay with going through this real quick?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to do my best. I always, as Marissa knows, I sometimes do my best to use sports analogies when describing this. So, um, we can look at this like it's the Boston Marathon. And so, in a minute, I'll tell you that we're getting ready to go up Heartbreak Hill. Um, the budget is a 2-year budget. The process started back in August and September, which is the agency phase of the budget, where then Governor Sununu sent directions to the state agencies to begin to prepare a budget that they would present to him in the what they then refer to as the governor's budget hearings, which take place in November every other year. And then kind of goes dark, and for several months, the budget is developed by the governor. This year was different because it was a period where the budget activity was transferred from Governor Sununu to Governor Ayotte. Although James Jerry, who's the governor's budget director for Governor Ayotte, was also Governor Sununu's, so there was some consistency in the handoff there. And then not a lot happens publicly during that process. But what CSNI and other advocacy groups do is work very hard with the state agencies and the governor's budget writing team to elevate key issues of importance to them. During these first two phases, the agency phase and the governor's phase, what becomes a big part of the conversation is what's referred to as the priority needs budget. Here, the agencies under state law have to prepare two budgets. One is an efficiency budget, which says how much money do we need to run the agency based upon the current statutory structure and some other things, federal requirements and things like that. And then they're asked to come forward with prioritized needs so that the expertise at the agency are advising the governor and then eventually the legislature to say what else is needed besides what we're currently funding now. Um, so all of that is taken by the governor's budget writing team, and by February 15th of each year, they have to present what's euphemistically referred to as the governor's budget to the House Finance Committee. The budget has to begin there. It takes a form of two pieces of legislation. House Bill 1, which is the actual appropriations, and it's about 5,000 pages long. And then House Bill 2, which is a combination of the statutory provisions needed to implement provisions of the budget, but it often includes direction for new items in the budget. When it starts off, House Bill 2 is mostly around budget issues, but because it's a must-pass piece of legislation, other things got hung onto it. And so in a minute, we'll talk about the current state of House Bill 2. And there's probably 30 different provisions that have nothing to do with the budget, but were added on as a way to try to advance public policy proposals that on their own might not have succeeded. So then from February 15th until through March and the beginning of April, the House Finance Committee has possession of the budget. And they break the budget up into three divisions. Division 3 is the biggest part of that, and that is exclusively the Health and Human Services budget. In the midst of this work, in addition to the Finance Committee, the Ways and Means Committee has to deal with how much money do they expect to be brought in through taxes and fees and other mechanisms to fund the budget. That's also a part of House Bill 1, but they carved that piece out and sent it to the Ways and Means Committee. That's where things began to break down this session. The governor's revenue estimates were based on a lot of work that she did with the the Commissioner of Revenue Administration and the state's economist, Brian Gottlob, who works for the Department of Employment Security. And they advanced a set of budget revenue estimates that they continued to feel quite confident about, but the House majority felt differently and made significant reductions in what they anticipated being available revenues for the budget. We don't have time to get into all of those, but suffice it to say, it was significant. In the context of the $16 billion budget, it was about a $500 million differential in general funds that would be available. And so Division 3 was given secret marching orders about how much they needed to reduce from the governor's recommended budget. As it turned out, they ended up reducing about $290 million in general fund spending over the course of 2 years. Unfortunately, some portion of that also reduced the amount of federal match that was available because of the Medicaid cuts that were made. The House finished their work and sent the budget to the House floor where they took it up on April 10th. It was in controversy. It was a long session where they had about 40 different proposed floor amendments. Only a couple of them passed. But at the end, there was some drama where they needed to pass the budget, and they did not have enough votes to do it. And they put it on the table while they went to dinner, and they strong-armed members of the Republican Party who weren't yet ready to vote for it, and they ended up passing the budget by 10 votes. That was only a few days ago, and now the Senate has possession of the budget, where they will be going through a deliberative process similar to what the House Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee did. Working backwards for you all, the Senate will take up the full budget on June 5th. The Finance Committee will vote on it on May 28th. The public hearing on the budget will be May 6th. So they'll have this period from May 6th to May 29th where they really dig in deep and make some decisions in the committee about what a final budget would look like. Very rough justice here is they're likely to have newer and more optimistic revenue estimates. So they're very likely to be in a position to restore some of the cuts that were made to the governor's budget, and then also bring forward some additional priorities that might not have been in the governor's budget or may have been part of Senate appropriations bills that started back in January. All of that will come to a head after the Senate votes on it. More often than not, like 90% of the time, the House and the Senate disagree on the final version of the budget, and they'll go to a committee of conference where all kinds of shenanigans can happen because they need to end up coming to an agreement that the conferees all agree to. And then in the House and the Senate, their only choice is to vote up or down on the committee of conference report. That will usually take into the last couple of days of June, and then the governor has to either sign it or veto it on by July 1st. So I forgot to use my sports analogies, but I think probably where I think we're probably at now is in Wellesley. I don't know how many people on the phone ran the Boston Marathon, where you've got a lot of the volume or distance of the race behind you, but you've got some big hills to climb, and that's where we are now. The first of those hills is to encourage the Ways and Means Committee to be as optimistic as possible on revenues, and then make sure the issues that are important to us are elevated as issues that if more funding is available, they are able to fund. So later in this slide deck, Marissa and I will talk about how we're trying to narrow some of the needs so that they become priorities for the Senate budget writers.
Jim, what happens if the governor vetoes the budget?
A few things could happen. State government could shut down. But usually what they do is they'll pass a continuing resolution where they will authorize the state to continue to spend at either the current levels, or one year I saw it, they gave them the authority to continue spending at 95% of current levels. Uh, the two times I've been around when they vetoed budgets, they would do a continuing resolution and come back in September and take the budget up. They take up the budget again. Um, when Governor Benson vetoed the budget, he thought they were spending too much money, and when they came back and passed it in September, they actually spent more. And then Governor Hassan's veto of the budget was over Medicaid expansion, and ultimately they agreed to deal with that the following session and pass the budget pretty much the way it was sent to her in June.
Great. Thank you. Anything else to add on this? Or are you okay with I go to the next slide?
Sure.
All right. So we'll walk through each of the different pieces of the DHHS agency request. So like I mentioned earlier, we are specifically going to look at the Bureau of Developmental Services. There are a few other areas that, certainly DHHS is a large part of state government with a lot of different parts. So, we'll really just focus on those that are applicable to developmental services. So the efficiency funds, I think, Jim, you mentioned this earlier. Efficiency funds are the funds that are just needed to keep meeting current needs. So that is sort of level funding, if you will, just continuing to fund the things that are already happening to keep them going. So DHHS requested the numbers that are here, efficiency funds for the in-home supports waiver, the developmental disabilities waiver, and the acquired brain disorder waiver. So in fiscal year 26, there were 494 million total. And fiscal year 27, there was $519 million total. You'll see on the slides, it says GF and FF. GF is general funds, so those are state general fund dollars, and FF is federal funds. For developmental services, Medicaid dollars for New Hampshire are matched dollar for dollar. So the state, every dollar that the state spends for Medicaid for certain developmental services is matched with a matching federal dollar. So it's a dollar for dollar match. So every time that you see, I shouldn't say every time, most times when you see a general fund spend for developmental services cut, it means that there's also a federal fund cut as well, matching federal fund cut. So these numbers that are here are the combined numbers, and over the entire biennium, the efficiency funds were 1.013 billion. Anything else to add on this one, Jim? Okay. So next are the prioritized needs. So I have a few slides on this. Prioritized needs, as Jim was describing, are areas that the department feels would be very important to fund over the next 2 years. So these are on top of the efficiency funds. So for fiscal year 26 and 27, some of the ones that we really are going to spend some time with today are funding for the wait list. Even though it's called the wait list, it's really not a wait list in New Hampshire. So what this is funding for new services, people who are anticipated to need services over the next 2 years, people who are coming out of schools, people who are going to be in need of certain new services. So these are numbers that come from what's called the registry at area agencies, where area agencies help the state in planning ahead of what services will be needed. So this is funding for that. Really, it's called wait list, but it's almost a list of ways to avoid a wait list because at this time, wait lists are not in compliance with the law, but we'll get into that a little bit later. This is also, it included funding for room and board, so increased room and board. And again, we'll get into that detail a little bit later on. Rate setting for 4 different services. So those services, many of you know, the department has been working with some consultants over the past several years to put rates in place and did a lot of analysis and work with provider agencies to identify the best way to sort of just add some structure and set some rates for different services. These 4 services that were included would have been included were respite, CPS, also known as day programs, community support services, and supported employment. So that those 4 services would have been included in this prioritized need, and a continuation of the recreation funding. So some of you may have benefited from some of the increased funding that was made available to fund different recreational activities over the past year, and this would have continued that. So the first prioritized need that we'll go over is room and board. So right now, room and board funding is not something that you can use Medicaid dollars for. That is against the law. So any room and board funds need to come from general funds in the state. What room and board is there is a cap that is allowed, an allowable cap to funds that can be paid by an individual. And the cost of living in the state of New Hampshire is much higher than what that cap allows. So for individuals who are supported in staffed residences, these dollars help fill that gap to allow these staffed residences to continue. Oftentimes, these are individuals who experience very complex needs, whether those are behavioral or medical, and oftentimes they need 24-hour staffing to help support them to live in the community. So without an increase to this allocation, provider agencies may need to close their programs. This would leave the individuals who live there homeless or needing a new place to live. This would also prevent new programs from opening. So, young adults who are coming out of schools who need a staffed residential setting, it may be very challenging to identify places for those individuals to live. This would be a negative in that there would be fewer options for those folks who are needing 24-hour supervision. So DHHS had requested $10 million in general funds to fund this over the biennium. So it was $5 million per year. The second prioritized need were the rate increases. So I mentioned what services those were earlier. The current funding for developmental services does not allow budget increases to account for inflation. So once somebody has a budget, it generally stays the same until there is a specific request, most often tied to an increase in need. Budgets oftentimes remain low, and there's not a long-term mechanism to increase these to allow for competitive wages for DSPs. So without these rate increases, it could be more challenging for provider agencies to operate and to find direct support professionals. So in order to fund these rate increases, DHHS requested a total of $64.2 million total for the biennium to fund rate increases and rate setting for those 4 services that I mentioned earlier. Next prioritized need is recreational services funding. So I mentioned earlier that the recreational services were funded the current year that we're in. At this point, all of those funds have been expended. So federal Medicaid dollars can't be used to fund activities that are defined as recreational. And for many people with intellectual disabilities, these are critical activities that allow them to participate fully in their communities. DHHS had requested $1 million in general funds to continue this over the next 2 years. So matching the allocation that for the year that we are currently in, which was 500,000. So this would have continued this service option for the next 2 years. And this at this point is not in the budget. So this was an additional prioritized need of the department. And the next was waitlist funding. So the waitlist funding was, as I described earlier, is the projected amount of funding that is anticipated to be needed to support people who are new to the system across the next 2 years. And it would only become a waitlist if it was not funded, which is illegal per RSA 171A 1A. So many of you who have been involved with developmental services for many years may remember years ago the fight to make sure that wait lists were not allowed in New Hampshire. I want to say it was like 12 years ago, I think, 10 or 12 years ago, with the People Can't Wait slogan. So this is an area that is really important to this community. And in order to fund the wait list, DHHS had requested $62.8 million to support anticipated new needs over the coming biennium. So that was all of our prioritized needs. I don't know, Jim, do you mind walking through just at a high level what the process has been for Governor Ayotte's version of the budget? So we have this slide and then the next slide that goes into it in a little more detail.
Yeah. So it was not great news. It wasn't awful news. It was kind of somewhere in the middle there, given the constraints that the governor was feeling with regard to um, um, downward pressures on state revenues. So what the governor did was to I'm trying to without taking 45 minutes to describe this. What the governor's budget did was um, fund the efficiency budget, but added into that the financial needs in order to address the so-called wait list. And so what the governor's budget did not do was address the room and board issues, the recreation funding, or anything with regard to rate adjustments. So that's how the governor's budget um, was presented back in February. Now that as a practical matter, and this is where it gets a little complicated, but in order to get to that number, the governor advanced into the upcoming biennium anything they perceived as potential carry forward dollars. So there is a provision. It's a it's an organizational note in the budget that we're working on now that any funds that are appropriated to the Medicaid line items for developmental services, if they are unspent, they move forward into the next biennium. So they carry them forward. And so, in order to get to the bottom line number that the governor undertook, she assumed that there would be $30 million in unspent money in 2026 and $50 million in unspent appropriation in 27. So there's this exercise. If you look at page, what is it, 901 of the 5,000 page budget, you can see that they $1 million out in 2026 relative to the current appropriation, but then through an organizational note, add it back in. So there's some complexity in the way it was done, but the practical fact is she funded the efficiency budget in waitlist. Um, and I'm doing that without looking at the slide in front of me, Marissa. So I think this kind of walks us through
It does.
um, that transaction.
Yeah. And that is a complexity that's somewhat unique to developmental services. So, it is hard to understand. So if that just seems like a lot of gibberish to you, it's absolutely understandable. It is complex and is unique to our services. Right. So I kind of skipped fast through here, but this slide basically recaps what Jim just shared. The fact that all prioritized needs except the waitlist were unfunded, and it cut $80 million from funding, but added it back in with what was called carry forward funds that were brought forward from the biennium that we are in. That is a number not just for funds that were from this current biennium, but sort of collected funds over several years for unspent dollars, which often come from things like people who may start, they may come out of school, they may have funding approved, but can't find a DSP or can't find a provider agency to start working with that individual right away, and those dollars go unspent. So the governor presented this information, as Jim mentioned, on February 13th of 2025. On April 10th, the House of Representatives voted on their budget. So this is a recap of what is currently in House Bill 2. Are you able to see the slide to go through this, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, to be clear, some of this is House Bill 1, but most of the policy associated is in House Bill 2. So, as we said, much like the governor's budget, it only funded the efficiency budget. But what they did not do is what the governor did, which is put additional funding in the budget to ensure that 275 or so folks who were anticipated to move into the system would not be put on any sort of a wait list. In a minute, I'll talk about some important policy considerations that Marissa and I were able to convince them to undertake in that front. In addition to that, they proposed that there'd be an across-the-board cut to all Medicaid rates um, of 3%. So the impact on developmental services in this arena is estimated to be about $14.1 million in general funds and the associated matching reduction in federal funds for a total of 28.3 million over the biennium of reduced rates of money available in Medicaid rates. They also require a $46 million back of the budget cut. And this is just, it's not unusual where the legislature directs the department to say, look, over the course of the next 2 years, find a way to reduce some additional spending. We'll give you the flexibility to figure out how to get there. What's unusual here is how substantial the back of the budget cut is. I've seen it as high as $22 million, but it is $46 million. So should that remain in the budget, it means that very quickly the department is going to have to be making some decisions about what funded programs they would have to reduce. Let me point out something. I don't know if it's on a slide here or not, but it does get to some protections around the wait list. Marissa mentioned earlier that RSA 171A, Roman 2A, I think it is, whatever it is, it passed a few years ago, and it requires that, or prevents the department from having a wait list for services. And in doing so, gives the department the authority to come back to the Legislative Fiscal Committee and asked for additional funds to ensure that everybody who is eligible for DD waiver services receives them. There was a 2-day period or so where they proposed to suspend that state law, so it would have made it lawful for there to be a wait list. Um, and we, right or wrong, I think it was right, we made the audible decision in the corridors of the State House while they were deliberating this to convince them not to suspend the statutory provisions because it would continue to put pressure on the system to fund the wait list. And we prevailed on that. In part, I don't know if he's on the call or not, but Will Walker made a plea from the perspective of a parent about the anxiety that having a wait list creates, and I think it won the day. So we, at the very least, don't have to worry about, at least for the time being, that the suspension of the wait list. Our worry was that if they did it once every year, we're going to have to deal with that. It was a hard fought battle to get it, so keeping it in was important. So that's that slide with some extra information, Marissa.
Thank you. Yes, and I don't think that I had a slide, so I appreciate you adding that in. There is also, even though that law is still in place, and the department does have the ability to come back and ask for more money, there's no obligation for fiscal to give it to them. So we have the law in place, but as the budget currently sits, there's no funding for it. So
Correct.
it's an interesting predicament.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a recap of the cuts that were made in the House version of the budget. You'll see up here in the light blue box that the wait list was removed. And on top of the removal of all prioritized needs, there was an additional 3% Medicaid rate cut. And what you don't see on this graphic is that additional $46 million back of the budget cut, because we don't know what the department would do, whether they would choose to cut at BDS, whether they would choose to cut that elsewhere. So we have no idea what that looks like. So that is not included here.
I'd only add that the largest single component of the Department of Health and Human Services budget is the Developmental Services Department. So it's hard to imagine that it would be left untouched.
Thank you, Jim. So this is likely the most recent thing that you've seen on the news. There's certainly a lot of coverage of what is going on with the state budget in different news outlets right now. The budget crossed over to the Senate on April 14th, so fairly recently. It is now the responsibility of Senate Finance to amend the budget based on their own financial projections. And what that means is that we are at a point that senators need to hear from their constituents. What we have seen so far is senators have been appreciative of the information that they have been given. I know many of you have submitted a lot of stories, and I really, really appreciate that. So again, just to recap what this means for families, that there would be no funding for new services if the budget stays as it is today. There would be a 3% cut to all Medicaid rates. This would be effective January 1st of 2026, so not effective right away, but fairly soon, to just all Medicaid rates across the board. This was not just for developmental services, this was everything. Providers may not be able to absorb this. There would not be wage flexibility for DSPs. A 3% cut is substantial, and it likely for many provider agencies who don't operate with much margin at all to begin with, this would be a really, really tough thing to absorb. Additional cuts would be required at DHHS, and it's not clear where this would come from. So that's in reference to the back of the budget cuts. And there would be no additional funds for room and board. Likely residences might have to close. We have already spoken with several provider agencies that would have been impacted by this, and they are reporting that they're already losing, in some cases, thousands of dollars a year on these, and they're operating in the red, and that they would likely have to make a business decision to close some of those residences if they are operating at a loss, just because the cost of living in New Hampshire is really, really high. So those are some of the impacts, and certainly, many of you will likely have different experiences as well. So I mentioned the stories earlier, that, I really appreciate those stories that you are all sharing. I see all of those. We are up to, we've heard 100 from last check, I think 131 people have submitted their stories as of this afternoon. So I really, really appreciate it. And we've been trying to share quotes from those stories as far as we can. And actually, the latest, I don't know if we have anybody from Region 1 on, but there was a request from Jean Shaheen to have some of those, to hear some of those stories. So we are also sharing it through infographics. We are sharing it through social media. We are sharing it in press releases, and there was an op-ed this past week with some of the quotes. So really trying to share your story. So I really appreciate, everything you're all doing to, advocate and share what this means to your families. So some of the impacts to the 3% cut to Medicaid rates, are shared here, talking about DSP wages and institutionalized care, talking about losing caregivers losing jobs, parent caregivers would end up having to likely stay home to support their loved ones. If the wait list is not fully funded, some similar feedback. So a lot of parents sharing that they would have to quit their jobs, and what do we do when you cut a family's income in half, in some cases. And not only that, but the individuals who are receiving services, potentially losing their jobs and having to stay home and lose skills. Cuts to room and board. It's there's mentions again of institutionalization. Where would these individuals go? In some cases, these are not people who always have family to advocate for them. They aren't always people who have an alternative place to live. They require a lot of medical care, a lot of behavioral support. So it's scary for some of those individuals to think, what would happen to me? So we shared a little bit about what you can do. So I don't know, Jim, if you want to talk a little bit about what is the best way for people to advocate right now on the budget?
So, as you said, the budget is in the possession of the Senate, specifically the Senate Finance Committee. Um, and in addition to that, it's a relatively small body. There's only 24 members of the Senate, so we're urging people to not only focus on the 9 members of the Senate Finance Committee, but to all 24, so that they can communicate to their colleagues on the Finance Committee what some of their expectations may be. Um, the There's no one way to to change their minds or to get their attention. I generally have this rule of 5, that if you want to get some action taken with a member of the legislature, trying to figure out a way to have 5 unique contexts with them is important. So there's the public hearing. There's the opportunity to talk to people one-on-one if you're able to come to the State House. And then there's also, written and email communications. But probably what's of critical importance is that they hear from folks and view it through the local lens. So anywhere we can support your work, or the legislative liaisons can do that to reach out to members of the Senate locally, is going to be really important. For some of that folks, it may be having the opportunity to meet with them in person. I got a message earlier today that there's some work being done with Senator Rochford and Lang tonight or tomorrow, for a regional meeting in this front. And then wherever possible, if you're reaching out to members of the Senate by email, for example, in the subject line, make sure you reference the town that you're from so that they know that it's coming from a local constituent. And then, if I didn't mention it before, we want an army of people dressed in pink to show up at the public hearing on the 6th. I was in a meeting with the Senate President this morning, and she said, urge people to come. That's how we know what's important. We had a great showing at the House Finance Committee. I would expect, though, that there will be more people at the Senate hearing because the House budget made meaningful reductions to the governor's proposal. So there'll be more people that see things at risk, including us.
Mhm.
So we want to bring some focus, though. And so what this slide is asking you to do, and there's background information in the previous slides, is to push for fully funding the wait list, eliminate the 3% Medicaid cut, and focus on funding the room and board increases. While there may have been 6 bad things in the House budget, these are the 3 most important, we think, from the perspective of the impact on individuals and families.
Yeah,
And then,
thank you, Jim.
I'm promising something Marissa didn't know is we will probably in a couple weeks after the hearing on the budget, we might want to do a version of this webinar again just to brief you on where things are at. We'll understand the touch points and know which members of the Senate we might want to bring some focused attention to.
Thank you, Jim. And Jim has just mentioned the public hearing, so you will be hearing more about that. We actually just this past week, I think it was, heard the official date and time of the public hearing, so we will be sharing more about that. But is it 2 p.m.? What time is the?
Yeah, it'll start at 2 p.m. on the 6th of May.
Okay.
And it'll go until 5. Let's take a break and come back in the evening.
Yeah.
But our experience would show that you want to get there before 2 o'clock
Mhm.
so that you're able to get signed up and ready to go early.
Yeah.
And it's a long conversation, and you may wait 2 hours to speak for 2 minutes. But as I said, they count heads and they listen.
Yeah. And we will have, Jim mentioned the legislative liaisons, for those who joined our hearing, our House hearing back in March. We have, there's a lot of support there and folks who are willing to help you testify. You can submit written testimony as well. So it really matters. We had over 100 people show up at the House hearing, which was fantastic. But now, even with that, we still see the severity of these cuts. So it is critically important that families and individuals plan to join us at the Senate hearing, because without advocacy, there's a lot of people who are advocating for the same pot of money. I want to call out that 3% Medicaid rate cut particularly. That applies to all Medicaid rates. That includes hospitals, that includes doctors' offices, medical care. The mental health system received a significant cut as well. So it's a cut in a lot of different areas. So there's a lot of people advocating in many ways. So it is really important to do what you can. Contact your senator, come to the hearing. Please take a look at the CSNI website as well for updated information, as well as our Facebook on if you want to join the public hearing. There we go. Okay, so you'll have a QR code on your screen. That brings you to the Senate Finance page on the General Court website. And there's a button there that says Email Committee, and that'll show you all of the people who are on Senate Finance if you would like to email them. You can also find who your senator is by clicking on this link here or typing it up. It's on, even if you just Google New Hampshire General Court, you click the Senate button and it will show you. It's a drop down. You pick the town that you're from and it will show you who your senator is. If you've never reached out to them before, that's a quick way to find out who your representative is. So some additional resources for more information, as I mentioned, CSNI on Facebook and LinkedIn, or our website. You can also connect with your area agency. So each area agency has a legislative liaison whose job it is really is to help connect families, and to understand local families' needs around legislative advocacy and to share information. So that is always a really good way, to kind of find out what's going on for you locally. You can also take a look at the New Hampshire General Court website. So if you have never been there, I would encourage you, and you're interested in this, I would encourage you to take a look at that website, for a lot of information about a lot of different things, all related to state policies, the budget, everything related to state politics. New Futures, I shared one of their slides earlier. They are a really great resource, as is the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute for analysis on the budget and for advocacy information. New Futures also has a lot of resources related to providing testimony. They have some walkthroughs of where things are, on the state campus. So if you want to go to a hearing, you're not sure where to go, they actually show you where everything is. So it make it really easy to, get around and find what you need. So those are both reliable sources of information. And that is it. So thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your time today, and I hope you have found this helpful. Barring any IT issues, I will post this on the CSNI website, and at that point, you're free to share it with others who may not have been able to join us today. And again, if you have any questions, I would kind of refer you over to some of these resources, and hopefully we can make a difference with advocacy with the Senate. So thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Marissa.
All right. Bye-bye.